I don't know if this is haunting. Well, maybe it is. I should probably start with some context. I'm 19 and I just moved back to my hometown, a little historic town in the Midwest, though we moved away when I was little, so I barely remember this place anyway. I came back here to go to college, so I bought one of the many old houses in the suburbs. In case you're wondering, my parents died when I was 14 and they left me some money, enough to buy a house and start school at least. I moved here about 3 weeks ago. You can tell the house is dated. Old creaky floorboards, distressed wooden pillars, American Foursquare style I think. Something out of the 1920s for sure. I didn't have any strange feelings about the house. No brushes of cold wind or hair standing on the back of my neck, which is why I hesitate to call this hunting. It began with nightmares. It's unusual for me to remember my dreams, but my first night here, I had the most vivid one of my life. In the dream, I woke up, got out of bed, and walked downstairs. I didn't notice until I had turned on a lamp in the living room, but the rooms were lined with mirrors. They were everywhere, covering every inch of the walls and even the ceiling. I've read that some people don't see the reflections in their dreams, but mine was clearly visible, staring right at me with fixated attention. An odd difference between us was that she had long hair down to her waist. I wore it that way a few years ago, but now I keep it shoulder length. Not sure if that means anything. She mimicked my every move, obviously, but her eyes, it was me but not. Somehow, like she could see things that I couldn't. The mirrors were strange too. They seemed to continue the space, like they were windows. I mean, I could see the reflection in the living room, but it was darker. The lamp wasn't on, and the walls in the back didn't seem to be there. The room looked like it went on forever into a dark, limitless void. Then all these noises began ringing out from deep inside the house. At first, it was a low grumble building into a howl. Shortly after, banging noises echoed throughout the house from under the door. The pipe started to rattle furiously from behind the walls. The floorboards jumped up like something was fighting to get out. I could hear the shower upstairs bursting like Old Faithful was coming through it. All the sinks were going wild in the kitchen and bathrooms with water erupting from the drains. And the crazy thing is that I wasn't scared at all. I just stood there, staring at the chaos, and every time the moment before I wake up, I turn towards the mirror, gaze at my reflection and smile. I've been plagued by this same dream every night since I moved in. Naturally, it was freaking me out, affecting my studies because I wake up exhausted like I've been running all night. Each time I wake up suddenly, gasping in a cold sweat. Still, I assumed that it was just stress, adjusting to a new place in a new city. But the reason I'm writing this is because this isn't isolated to my dreams anymore. Last night, I went to shower upstairs. I was waiting for the water to heat up when I noticed that the drain was a bit clogged. Figured it would work itself out, but the bathtub continued to fill up. I left the bathroom briefly only to return to see the water about to pour over the rim of the tub. I shut off the water and waited about an hour, but the water wasn't draining even the slightest. Thankfully, I have one of those long jugged plastic snares used to unclog drains. Submerged up to my knees in the tub, I started using it in the drain. I hooked something immediately and pulled hard. I heard a few sputters from the drain as bubbles floated to the surface. I kept pulling. It felt like I had hooked the biggest bass of my life, but the water was gradually draining as I yanked the hell out of the clog. Finally, the plastic snare came up and a huge chunk of black hair with it. I have black hair, but just like in the dream, this hair was unbelievably long, and it just kept coming. It was incredibly thick and twirled into something of a rope. I had to use my hands. I must have pulled 10 feet of hair out of that drain. I don't have any roommates, no landlord. Nobody has access to my house but me. The shower worked fine until this point. Somehow, all of this feels very personal. My reflection in the mirror smiling at me, the same hair color in the drain. I feel like I'm losing my mind. But all of this started with the house. It must be the house. I can't explain these events any other way. But what gets me is that the water was shooting out from the drains in my dreams. The pipes were rattling. It's too unreal to be mere coincidence, which makes me wonder. If hair was in the drain, what could be under the floorboards? After I pulled a few yards of hair out of my shower drain, I spent the night in the college library. It's open 24 hours during finals, but I'd hardly call my nights restful. I nod off only to shoot awake a few moments later. My brain was fried. It took me 5 attempts just to write the first part. I spent Friday afternoon sprinkling salt around the house, lit sage, recited prayers from the Bible, tried chalk and protective seals. I didn't feel any kind of positive or negative presence, honestly. I don't know if it made any difference. I felt pretty stupid and started to wonder if I had hallucinated the entire thing. Until I went upstairs. The hair was still there, a long black cord snaking across the bathroom floor out into the hall. It hadn't moved, thank God, but it was just as haunting. I was too afraid to touch it, so I left it there. I decided to go to a hotel, even though I hate them. Those cold, sterile rooms remind me of my life after my parents died, the disconnected foster homes I endured until I finally got out. You don't care about that. Anyway, I've since spent the last 3 nights in a local hotel. The dreams are still with me. Friday night the nightmare came again. Waking up in my house and walking downstairs, turning on the lamp in the living room, mirrors along the way on every inch of my walls. My reflection was there like always, but this time things were a little different. It was clear she was trying to tell me something. Again, the loud noises erupted throughout the house, but the water shooting from the drains had stopped, and now the floorboards were trembling harder than ever. They were leaping off, peeling back. It felt like an earthquake. The whole house was shaking, but amazingly the mirrors were still, as if the house was moving around them. They seemed like a getaway to another world. She was standing there, on the other side of the mirror, the long-haired me, gesturing at the floorboards despite the chaos. It was only then that I noticed her right forefinger was missing. She was intent on the floor, staring dead into me with urgency. She looked in pain, pleading. I looked to the floorboards, but I could hardly move with the ground shaking so furiously beneath me. I leaned against the mirror for support, and when I looked back, she was banging on the other side with her fists, screaming. I don't think they were words, just cries of suffering and horror. Tiny cracks were forming in the glass, just as I see my reflection explode into a storm of shards before me. My eyes should open. The same exact dream since that night. Every morning the same gasps for air. 3 nights of that shit, and I couldn't take any more. I returned to the house this morning. People were telling me to leave, to move, to get out. But if you've never had anyone you loved die, the idea of a presence after death is comforting in a way. My parents were my whole world. I lost them when I was 14. I think part of me wanted to know what was after death, wondering if somehow this was them trying to reach me. If you've never lost someone, you don't understand. I think I was half insane at the time. I probably still am, given my lack of rest. I sleep, but it's not enough with those dreams. God, I'm probably losing it. But I picked up an axe and a crowbar. I just had to know. I needed to know. If these dreams aren't going away, shit, I'm really tired. I'm still reeling from what I found, trying to collect myself as I type this. I took the crowbar to the living room floorboards, the place where she had pointed in the dream the night before. I was at it for a while, not the easiest thing to do. It took prying up a few narrow floorboards before I could get a decent opening in the floor. At first, I didn't see anything. Plywood support underneath. Typical, but at the edge of the small opening I had made, I saw a dark spot, a hole. There was a small hole about the size of my hand. I grabbed my phone and used the flashlight so I could see. A sickening wave came over me instantly. A finger. Bones now with bits of connective tissue, still between the joints, but a small finger, like from a child. Morning light was streaming into my living room. I was frozen. Hand was shaking as I held this little thing. Anxiety, I can't even explain. My breath was staining. It felt like hours. I was staring at this finger, dizzy from the realization of what my dreams, what this house was telling me. The agonizing amount of time forced my eyes to refocus, and I spotted something else in the hall. The light through the windows was illuminating everything except for a distinct black spot. A tiny opening. Shining my phone into the hole again, I could see a narrow crevice went all the way through to a room underneath. There was a basement in this house. No one mentioned a basement to me. Honestly, I don't think my realtor knew, and who the hell knows if the precious owner was holding out or not. But at this point, I wasn't stopping. My head was spinning, but I was determined to find out what the hell was going on, what had happened in this place. There aren't many places one could hide a secret door in this house. I checked the closet positioned underneath the stairs, figuring that was the most obvious. And I was right. The wall in the back was ordinary in every way, but I started feeling around the edges. Sure enough, around the bottom of the back was a tiny crack with a flow or cool air. It was sealed though. Couldn't find any holes. But I bought that axe today and I was going to use it. All of this felt personal somehow. I felt chosen. Was I helping a ghost? Was I solving a crime? Was I connecting to the other side? So many questions raced through my mind. After I had made a sizable opening, I ventured into the space with my phone's flashlight. The stairs were narrow. Definitely a home project. It's possible the previous owners didn't know about this basement because somehow probably built it themselves. Upon reaching the bottom, I was surprised to find a light had been installed. A single bulb with a string switch that illuminated the tiny space. The room was about 8 by 8 feet. Everything was made from cement, but nothing stunned my heart more than what was tucked in the corner. Children's toys and a small pink backpack. Along sections of the wall were eroded chalk drawings, innocent and playful. My suspicions about the finger belonging to a child were ringing true. My stomach was in knots. Tentative, I approached them. From the headless Barbie to the color of the backpack, I assumed it had to be a young girl. I had no idea what to think. A thick layer of dust covered the items, but I noticed a tag on the backpack with something written on it. I resolved my courage and grabbed it, figuring I had already come this far. Haley? From privacy reasons, I'm not going to share the last name, because the last name of this backpack also happens to be mine. Several people recommended I speak to the police about the found finger and the discovered basement in my house. I called them, but once they arrived, we found no trace of the length of black hair, nor the small finger. It was difficult to keep composure. I was racing around the house, checking under my bed for fucking hair. The finger I had put in a plastic bag, but it was gone. I thought the lack of sleep was making me lose it, and the cops probably thought the same. I swore to them that what happened was real, but at that point, they were only words. One unsettling thing that did linger, however, were cracks that had formed in the wall where my dream self had shattered the mirror in my dreams. One of the officers eyed the cracks curiously, but I didn't bother explain their origin, knowing he'd never believe me. Weirdly enough, they are sort of validating sign that I didn't imagine everything. The basement, however, is real for certain. I showed them the room, the child's item I had found, but without the evidence of a crime or body. They said it was out of their hands. They told me I could check with the county to see who submitted the permit to build the basement, but if it had been done illegally, it would be difficult to prove which tenant had made it. They also recommended that I get the space checked out with a constructor, to be certain of my safety. The half-destroyed house probably concerned them. Turned out they were right. No permit on record. I even looked into the floor plans, and there was nothing about a basement. Whoever created that secret room did so off the record, and it seems obvious that it has something to do with the girl, Haley, who shares my last name. Ever since I found the basement and Haley, my dreams have radically changed. No more loud banging, no water bursting from pipes or floorboards going berserk. Their mirrors are still present, and the dreams persist nightly, but who I can only assume is Haley stands behind the mirror, watching me with a sincere smile. She seems calm, satisfied. My nights are restful now. I spent days at the county office digging through records. I was determined to find out about Haley, if she had been adopted or kidnapped, and fervently made a list of every owner that had occupied my house for the last 30 years. The drowsiness of the basement suggested kidnapping, but I was skeptical at the notion. I guess I didn't want to believe it, but what I found in those records shook me beyond anything I could have ever been prepared for. The people who occupied the house around the time I was born? My parents. This was my childhood home. I spent the first few years of my life here, which must be why I was drawn to this place, a latent nostalgia that was calling to me all this time. Haley was my twin. It turns out she was my older sister, born 5 years before me. The part that haunts me, that makes me physically ill, is that Haley was declared dead at birth, but the items in the basement indicate that Haley had to be a toddler at least. For God's sake, there are chalk drawings of animals, a Barbie, a backpack, all suggesting that Haley could walk, draw, and likely talk. Why would my parents say she was stillborn? My parents are dead. I can't ask them, can't broach them for a reaction or closure. But now that I've discovered this information, I'm rethinking their death. Yesterday I decided to review the police report involving my parents' car accident. It happened at night. I was 14, at home with a babysitter at the time. Skid marks of the road indicated the vehicle went off the road to avoid something. Thick black tire marks suddenly veering to the left. No animal or body was found at the scene to give police any idea what may have spooked them, except for a brightly colored rubber ball in the ditch by their car. I never knew about the toy until now. Guess they didn't consider it important enough to tell me. But that night, my parents saw something and careened off the road into a tree. They weren't discovered until the next morning, and by then, they were already dead. I never saw them again, not even at the funeral, because I was told that I wouldn't want to see what happened to their faces after the accident. Maybe Haley was there, on the road, the way the hair was on my bathroom floor and the finger in my floorboards, a kind of reel that evaporates. I can only assume Haley looks like me in my dreams because she's related to me. And there was no other way my brain could translate that other than a mirrored reflection. Or maybe she intended it that way. Appearing as a stranger I didn't recognize may not have instilled the same dedication in me. Either way, my parents lied and declared her death at birth. She lost one of her fingers and was likely forced to live in a lightless room. Neglected, starved, abused. What the hell were my parents doing to her? Her existence was kept secret as if they never intended to let her reach adulthood. It leaves me with a notion that she was bred for some purpose beyond simply raising a child. A reason I can't conceive, or maybe I just don't want to. The question that haunts me the most is, why me? My parents were amazing to me. They were supportive and loving. Why did they choose me? Haley was born first and were they torturing her? Was she killed by accident or murdered? I know the evidence suggests the latter. All of this new information, I can't deny the implications, but my world is shattered. The people I love, monsters, all this time? Haley seems calm now. I'm not sure if she will move on soon or not, but she no longer frightens me. In my dreams now, she smiles and dances, carefree. She seems free for the first time.